Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is a Ukraine war news update for the 25th of October 2025. It's a military aid update. I have done my hits and losses video already today. Go and check that out if you haven't already, but don't check it out now because you're watching this. And I'd rather you hung out here. And we can have a chat. Good to see people are already joining. Thank you for doing so. We have quite a bit to talk about today because it's fairly dynamic at the moment, what's going on with regard to Zelensky meeting a number of different world leaders in London yesterday at the Coalition of the Willing, including, I think it was obviously Keir Starmer, Frederiksen from Denmark, is it Macron as well, and others. So yeah, some announcements out of that, and generally it's all going off at the moment with regard to Gripens. Lots of talk of what's going on with regard to Swedish assistance to Ukraine, and we're probably going to start there actually because there's more to say on Gripens. In fact, a couple of statements have come out today, so let's just do that then. Let's hop straight into this. I'm going to move you to that screen because I can, and I will. Right. Let us look then. I love this picture. It's just such a cool picture. So you have, that's a Swedish PM Christensen, I believe, and obviously your man Zelensky there in the cockpit. What do we have to say? So a number of these things I've already said, but just reminding you what's going on with the Gripens situation. Sweden is in talks to sell as many as 120 Saab Jazz 39E Gripen E multi-role fighter jets to the Ukrainian Air Force in a deal worth upwards of $10 billion, as President Zelensky meets this morning with Swedish Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson in the town of Linköping. So that's what happened the other day. It's the home of the Saab Defense Group. Yuri Ignat, the spokesperson for the Ukrainian Air Force, explained why the Gripen fighter is the most optimal choice for Ukraine. Our pilots have already mastered the Gripens, so that's key. Is that it appears that some Ukrainian pilots have already, mastered means that they are ready to fly them in a combat zone. One would think, right? These aircraft, first of all, are characterized by relatively low maintenance costs, which is what we know. Even though the cost of the F-35 is say coming down quite a bit. It is apparent that the Gripen is a pretty cheap, talking about per flight hour, pretty cheap plane to fly and maintain. There is such a parameter called flight hour. How much does 1 hour of flight cost for a Gripen compared to the F-35? The difference is significant. That's what Ignat said. Secondly, Gripens can easily operate from Ukrainian airfields and do not require any special infrastructure. They can actually take off from short runways and roads. The intake is not underneath. So I think the F-16s, the air intake is underneath the fuselage, and that means it sucks up FOD, foreign object debris, quite easily from the runways, and that means you have to be quite careful about where you operate them from. Zelensky confirmed that Ukraine has already trained and is training pilots for Gripen. Next year should be the beginning of the use of these aircrafts. So remember I told you about how there's this almost contradiction that they're not going to be able to get hold of Gripen E's from off the assembly line for another 3 years. So they're going to get 100 to 120 of these Gripens. And the question is, okay, is that 120, as you see here, 120 Gripen E's? Well, actually, is that 120 Gripen E's, or is it a whole bunch of Gripen E's and then a number of Gripen CDs that the Swedes are phasing out to replace with Gripen E's? So the Gripen E's, at the moment, the Swedish Air Force are receiving brand new Gripen E's, about 60 of them. Well, not about 60 of them coming off the assembly line. They received their first one the day before the press conference was held. And that then leads one to believe that Ukraine is going to receive the Gripen C's, Gripen CDs that these Swedes are getting rid of. And then after the Swedes get their consignment of 60 aircraft, the Ukrainians will then receive aircraft off the assembly line. But of course, you've also got not only the Swedish assembly line being scaled up, but also they can make them in Brazil, because Brazil makes Gripens as well as operates Gripens. And so there could be an option there. And they're also localizing production in Ukraine, apparently, as well. So we are discussing with Sweden not only the use of the newest Gripen E fighter jets, but also the possible delivery of the older Gripen C and D models. The dialogue is ongoing. So that's what Zelensky said, and that's exactly what I was talking about. The Gripen E is Sweden's latest generation fighter jet, whose production is just beginning. Initial deliveries to Ukraine are expected to start in about 3 years. So those are the new ones. And that's what Ulf Christensen said. So this is one of the things that Ozzy Bagger said. Gripen can be maintained by one full-time professional supported by a handful of low-trained conscripts. The idea is that you can actually operate them really from out in the middle of nowhere with a very small team. And that's one of the advantages. They're designed to fly against Soviet airplanes, right? They were designed for this sort of conflict, I guess, and for Sweden and Norway and Finland to be able to fly them off roads in Scandinavia, rather than of having to fly them out of air bases when there are relatively few air bases probably across the Nordic area. Loads of advantages for them. And some disadvantages, right, compared to other planes as well. So given Saab's order book, says John Ridge, I'd estimate a 24 to 36 month lead time for initial Gripen EF deliveries. With current facilitization, delivery would take 8 to 10 years to complete. In the interim, Sweden could realistically provide 10 to 15 Gripen CDs to establish a conversion pipeline. So the key is how many of these CDs are they going to get, and when are they going to get them? Is it just contingent upon Sweden replacing their CDs with the E's? And if they are getting 60 Gripen E's, are they increasing the size of their fleet, or are they doing a one-to-one replacement? And does that mean that Ukraine can get hold of 60 Gripen C, D fighter jets? That's what we want to know. Furious George here says, I can honestly say that once Gripens arrive in Ukraine, the life expectancy of Russian pilots flying in Su-35s will be measured in minutes after they take off toward Ukraine. We've discussed this extensively in his own sort of Twitter spaces. Right, I talked about this previously, so I'm going a little bit over old ground, but new viewers, and we need to remind ourselves just so we're on top of it. So they will be able to fire the Meteor missile. This is an air-to-air missile that it says here has a range in excess of 200 kilometers. I mean, the official range of the Meteor is maximum range 120 kilometers. That's the official, but actually it's well recognized that they can fly up to 200 kilometers estimated. No escape zone at 60 kilometers. So once you're locked in at 60 kilometers, you ain't getting out of there. Someone was also saying, I think it might be Michael Lamy, was also saying in one of the threads that actually there's thinking that they could have a range of exceeding 300 kilometers, and with turbo boost or some kind of ramjet, I don't know, something that he was talking about, maybe even up to 400 kilometers, but it's all kind of untested. Now, why that is significant is because I was saying the guided glide bombs that the Russians are now producing, they're thought to be able, or will soon be able to be fired up to 200 kilometers away from their target, which means that if you are flying a Russian jet and you are hitting a town, say, that's 50 kilometers behind the front line, you are firing that from 150 kilometers behind your own front line, which means you're 200 kilometers away from the target. Now, if you are a Gripen, that means that you are going to have to be flying close enough to the front line, 50 kilometers right from the front line, to be able to hit it with a 200 kilometer range Meteor jet. Okay, so if you can squeeze the range out even further, then you can move that back to 100 kilometers from the front line or whatever. But don't just think that. You've got to understand where these planes are operating around the front lines, because the closer to the front lines Ukraine use their Gripens, the more vulnerable they are to surface-to-air missile systems. Not so much the Russian jets themselves, but surface-to-air missile systems. So you really want to be very careful. It's easy to say, well, they're going to have Meteors on board, so that's great, one of the best missiles for the job. But actually, it depends how the Ukrainians are going to be using the Gripens and how the Russians are going to be using their jets, given that their guided glide bombs which would be one of the main things that these Gripens will hopefully be fighting against if they are going to shoot down Russian planes and not just use themselves for kind of ground attack missions. They are going to be threatening the Russian jets. Then, you know, it depends how the Russian jets are being used. Now, what this could do is push the Russian jets back, which is good news. They can be, so it's not just about, you know, actually shooting down Russian planes, but acting as a deterrent to change the behavior of the opposition. It's really, really important. So Ulf Kristersson has officially confirmed a transfer of Swedish Saab 890 type AWACS. So they've had 2 of these, which apparently have been very useful. I want to watch the Wes O'Donnell video on how effective these have been, but I assume they've been incredibly effective. We discuss Ukraine's defense. Sweden has Gripens that are currently not in use. We've already transferred reconnaissance aircraft to Ukraine. This is what we could do at this stage. Thanks to Swedish radars and capabilities of the F-16s operating in Ukraine have been further enhanced. So the F-16s have really benefited from these Swedish radar planes that have really good capabilities, and you can connect it all up to link 17, or was it link 16? I always get it wrong way around. But anyway, the communication system that connects surface to air missile systems to radars to planes to everything, and it gives everyone the ability to have the same kind of eyes. So you can kind of piggyback off these radar planes. So if you are a Gripen and you are flying maybe, I don't know, as I say, 50 kilometers from the front line, but 150 kilometers from the front line, you've got this Saab plane flying that has a much greater radar than the Gripen. So actually the Gripen is effectively now has a much extended radar range itself because it's piggybacking on the back of the Saab. And so it's really important these are up in the air doing their jobs all the time. That has been a significant win in a sense for the Ukrainians, because they shot down a bunch of the Russian A-50s kind of AWACS planes that are rare, and the Russians don't have enough of them, and to have lost a whole bunch to the Ukrainians is a really serious constriction of Russia's capabilities there. I'd love to see more of these Russian planes get blown up and taken out. You know, it's been a long time since we've had some, you know, Operation Spiderweb and the A-50s getting taken out. I'm hoping that sometime soon that we're going to have an early Christmas present from the Ukrainians. Right, Zelensky, it's not us though. It's not for us. It's for the Ukrainians, right? Zelensky said, "We saw the production facilities of Saab up close, from Gripen jets to anti-drone and reconnaissance systems. So don't think this is just about Gripens. The Saab and the Swedes have a whole bunch of cool stuff that the Ukrainians could well get their hands on." There was talk about you're going to see new capabilities when they are on the battlefield soon. People were wondering, and this was before the meeting at SAR, or the meeting between Kristersson and Zelensky in Linköping. That this weeks before that, they were making these cryptic comments. And people were wondering whether this was going to be about Gripens. And I'm still, they might have been referring to other things that could find their way to the battlefield fairly soon, or already be there, such as anti-drone weapons that Saab have been developing, radar capabilities, all sorts of different things. So it's not just about Gripens. And flight simulators, sorry, to finish off the sentence. Ukraine counts on a strategic partnership with Saab and is interested in developing joint defense production. Okay. So let's have a little look at that. Swedish defense company Saab AB, known for its Gripen aircraft, has agreed on joint production of air defense systems in Ukraine. Saab has become a participant in Build in Ukraine initiative, a program that attracts foreign defense companies to create production facilities directly in Ukraine. The following capacities are already operating or are preparing to deploy within the framework of the program. So the British BAE Systems has production and maintenance for the L119 howitzers. German Rheinmetall has a repair and production bases for armored vehicles. Swedish Saab, and there's talk even that the Links facilities might actually get up and running at some point. Swedish Saab, so this company we've been talking about, joint production of air defense systems. You don't quite know what that is. American Northrop Grumman, production of ammunition in Ukraine. In total, more than 25 foreign defense companies are already at various stages of localization of production in Ukraine. But of course, they are very vulnerable because the Russians are hitting Ukrainian military industrial complex targets on a routine basis. So anyway, this is good that Saab will produce air defense systems directly in Ukraine. 25,000 employee company joins over 25 other foreign firms operating in Ukraine. And then Sweden allows part of Ukraine's reparations credit to be used at the expense of frozen Russian assets for the production of 100 to 150 Jazz 39 Gripen E fighters, according to the defense minister. Now, I don't know if this is definitely happening, but Sweden are trying to advocate for frozen Russian assets to be used to fund the Gripen project. And we'll have to wait and see whether that is allowed. Sweden's defense minister says frozen Russian assets worth 7.35 billion euros could be used to fund Ukraine's potential purchase of 100 to 150 Gripen E fighters. If finalized, Russia would end up financing Sweden's biggest fighter export straight to Ukraine. Let's hope that does happen, actually. And we also hear news that Mirage, we're going to come to this later, but France has announced that more Mirages are going to go to Ukraine. I said a real game changer. Well, I keep saying that all these weapons we talk about, well, most of the big weapons are game changers. I'm going to go over this again because I am. So are F-16s game changers? Some people are like, no, they're not. Yes, they are, if there's enough of them. If they had 100 F-16s right now and the munitions to fire from them, that would change the game. So Flamingos, are they game changers? Yes, they are. If they had 10,000 of them right now, Storm Shadows, are they game changers? Yes, they are. If they had enough of them. So this is all about having enough scale. That changes the game. Now, it's not the same with all weapons, right? It's not like AK-47s. Is that a game changer? Well, if they had 2 million AK-47 machine guns now, would that change the game? No, it wouldn't. It wouldn't make the blindest bit of difference, right? They've got enough small arms, and they don't need any. It's not going to change the game. So this is only for certain things, usually distance weapons or big things like jets, right? So if they are getting, this is why I'm desperate to know how many Gripens they're getting, when they're getting them, how many Mirages, how many extra Mirages they're going to get, and when they're going to get them. Because I keep saying, and it did kind of pull, there is a pilot experience. They need the training as well, of course. And even when they're flying, that move from junior to experienced pilot is super important. That's when you lose them, you're losing so much. Experienced pilot losses are really problematic. But yeah, so I plucked the number out of my backside, but I said 70 planes and pilots and munitions. That's a game changer. They need 70 planes, and to be able to use them for massive usage of guided glide bombs and other Russian jet deterrents, and Storm Shadows and cruise missiles and whatever else they can do. So I'm hopeful that you're not going to see 70 jets, I'm pretty sure, but they still do have F-16s on the way. Yes, we've got the Belgian ones, but I think other ones from other places. And then you've got, I hope it'd be great if they still got MiG-29s in Poland. I don't know what's going on with them, but it'd be great if they could get some MiG-29s, because they do a lot of this grunt work to do with guided glide bombs. They're still dropping a lot of these American guided glide bombs. And then hopefully the Ukrainians are producing their own guided glide bombs. They need to compete with the Russians. They're getting up to 200 kilometers worth of range. That's what the Ukrainians need to be working on. But yeah, so MiG-29s, don't forget them. If they could get more of them, more F-16s, more Gripens, and more Mirages, then you're starting to move towards a realistic objective of getting 70 jets to the Ukrainian Air Force, and that would be huge. But of course, it's all about time. They're up against time, because if the US is going to force this war to a close, then there is a vulnerability for Ukraine that actually things start working in their favor after a certain time. I swing back and forth, to be perfectly honest, and you can have a chat with it amongst yourselves. And that sounds like I'm a teacher. Have a talk amongst yourselves, and I'll give you 5 minutes, and then we'll come back to this, and I'll pick you to come up and write on a whiteboard, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so who does time benefit the most? And initially, I used to think it was always Russia, and they were just playing the long game, waiting for allied nations to run out of gumption and will to support Ukraine and get bored and it's all cost too much, etc., etc. So you're always thinking that Russia's always trying to delay. But there are certain things where, like, if, for example, 6 months ago the war, or 3 months ago the war, was like brought to a grinding halt just before Ukraine was getting Gripens or getting this or getting that, and you're thinking, Ukraine really frustrated because they've been developing their flamingos, they've been doing this, they've been doing that, and all of these are just starting to come online, and then the war comes to an end, and actually it comes to an end to the benefit of Russia because Russia are in the ascendancy or whatever. So there are different times along the kind of the chronology of this war where at this point time is on Russia's side, and then at this point I think it's on Ukraine's side, and then Russia's side. So I'm not 100% sure, but I do, but maybe it's just me with my hopium copium. But you just hope that they can get online these much greater numbers of flamingos and FP1s and FP2s and Beaver and Luti drones, and then Gripens and F-16s and Mirages and etc., etc., etc. And the challenge for the Ukrainians is always boots on the ground, numbers of troops. That's where they really, really struggle with any kind of comparison against Russia. Okay. Anyway, that was a sidebar. Sweden will accept 150 fighter jets to Ukraine. This came out today from Zelensky, apparently, at least War Translated. Sweden will transfer 150 Gripen jets to Ukraine, with the first expected to arrive in 2026. So 2026 is a mere couple of months away. And that would, I think, indicate that the Gripen CDs will be going to Ukraine because, Christensen said they are not, Gripenese are not rolling off, and Sweden will get the first Gripenese. They're brand new plane. They're rolling off the assembly line. They're going to Sweden. 60 of them will go. You ain't getting these for 3 years. So if they're getting them next year, it is CDs. So yeah, sorry, just seeing this. Hi, Jonathan. Please show the video of the young Russians in St. Petersburg who protested against Putin. I've watched that video 20 to 30 times today. Something so powerful about it. Is this one from a week or two ago where they're singing a song and the songwriter or the musician woman was arrested thereafter? Let me know if that's the video. Okay, Zelensky, together with Sweden, this is another announcement. It appears from today, at least this is Max25 saying it today. Together with Sweden, Ukraine will significantly increase its combat aviation. Now, a historic step is agreement with Sweden on Gripen combat aircraft, and this is a good choice. We are counting on 150 such aircraft for Ukraine, and the first ones should appear next year. So this is what we're hearing. Gripens for Ukraine are part of our security guarantees. Such an air force that will be able to protect our skies 100%. And such a large-scale agreement on combat aviation for Ukraine has never been seen before. A historic achievement. We are working to fully implement it. So there you go. That is more on the Gripen. So that kind of concludes the Gripen segment for today. Sorry to have gone over much of this again. Vigo says Saab produces 20 to 30 Gripen E's per year, but is now opening a new facility to increase production rates. Yeah, so they're scaling up in Sweden, and obviously they would prefer to make them in Sweden rather than make them in Brazil, even though Saab would get some not royalty money, but you get your licensing money and whatnot from Brazil, but they prefer to make them all in Sweden. But in order to really speed things up, they want to double that to maybe making 40 to 60 Gripens a year, and then the Ukrainian Gripens would be not 3 years away, but maybe 1.5 years away. That would be ideal. But then I just think this war surely will be over within 1.5 years, but I guess I would have thought that 3.5 years ago. So who knows? I wonder what you think about how long this war will last. Sometimes I think, it's going to be brought to a halt fairly quickly. The US is going to do this, and Ukraine is going to be forced to capitulate, and so on and so forth. And never quite pans out. I think I don't want a war to continue because it concerns the death of many people unnecessarily. But I absolutely do not want this war to be brought to a hasty conclusion that favors Russia. We do, and not just for the Ukrainians' sake, actually. So it would be bad if the Ukrainians get a bad deal out of this and they lose X, Y, and Z unnecessarily. That is awful. But also, just for everyone in the world, if we allow Russia to get an advantage out of a quick, hasty, unjust resolution to this war, then we all lose, because we are advocating for, we are condoning and rewarding naked aggression in the world. And that's bad for us all, because that will come back and bite us all on the arse at some point. So it's really difficult, because I of course I want this war to end as soon as possible, but the as soon as possible is in the framework of in a just and beneficial manner for Ukraine. That's the key. The EU punted, so now we're on to oh, sorry, I missed this, Vigo. So you missed my post on Sweden having 54 Gripen CDs that might be made available for Ukraine. Those are not being upgraded to EF versions. Yeah, so okay, perfect. So that looks like a 1-for-1. Now, if they're not going to continue flying them, because as far as I understand it, Sweden doesn't have enough pilots at the moment. So if they're expanding their air force they're not going to upgrade these to EF versions. So they're staying the CD versions. You normally think, well, they're going to get rid of them, but if they're upgrading the size of their air force, then they aren't going to get rid of them. And they're going to keep the CDs, use them, and use the 60 new EF versions. But then that seems to be very unlikely, given that they don't have enough pilots by all accounts. So if they don't have enough pilots, then it seems very likely, as far as I would see, that the CDs are going to go to Ukraine. And if that's the case, then they're going to get 54 CDs. And if they are making 20 to 30 a year, then really you would think that the 20 to 30 would go straight away to Ukraine, that they could get 30 Gripen next year. The question then comes about training, actually. So it's one thing just getting these Gripens, and it's not like you can suddenly just, all right, we've got these Gripen E's, so we're just going to get rid of the Gripen CDs, because they still have to operate under NATO now, Sweden, and under the agreement with the other Nordic nations with their own kind of, they're working together on their own air defenses, Sweden, Norway, Finland, etc. So in order to fulfill those needs, you can't just get a plane in that you've never flown before. So yeah, a Gripen C is a Gripen and a Gripen E is a Gripen, but I assume there's going to have to be a period of time where they're training on a Gripen E, and so they might not want to let go of the Gripen CDs until they've embedded those Gripen E's into the Air Force. So there are some considerations. This is me like speculating off the top of my head. I've not spoken to any expert. I don't really know what I'm talking about, but that might be my understanding of that. Right. Okay. But it's great that you this is why I love you guys. You just such interesting comments with all of your various expertise. Okay. Right. So now we're going to go back to where I was, which is onto the regular military aid stuff, and we're going to start with funding. So the EU's punted until December, unfortunately, a decision on whether to tap frozen Russian assets, central bank assets, to aid Ukraine, after Belgium demanded greater assurances that it wouldn't be held liable for risks linked to the 140 billion euros, $163 billion loans, according to Bloomberg. I had said this before, but this is kind of rumbling on, where Belgium have been, because most of the money is in Euroclear, which is under the Belgian jurisdiction, they don't want to give all of that money to Ukraine, and then suddenly there are legal ramifications for that. And then a couple of years down the line, Belgium are held liable for all of that money being given to Ukraine, and it's been challenged in courts, and then they have to pay it back. And I understand that Belgium will not want that to happen, and they want reassurances from the EU that actually everyone would bear the costs of proportionally if something like that happens. So unfortunately, that means that has been punted to December, which is exactly the wrong thing. We'd like all that money to go there quite now. Lots of people commenting on the pilot thing. Sorry, I'm going to have to go, but keep it because it's fresh in our minds. Lots of young Ukrainian pilots are proficient in flying Gripens. I would like to know that that's true. What the where you get the data from there, but really how many as well. I'd love to know how many they could fly and when they could fly them, sort of those kind of numbers. Justin Brink, who's fantastic from the Royal United Services Institute, he's done an interview on it this morning on Times radio channel, so I'll have to check that out. I love a bit of Justin Brink. He's absolutely fabulous. Okay, so back to where I was. So Belgian Prime Minister has refused to support proposals to seize frozen Russian assets, in particular because Brussels also makes money from them, according to Le Soir. Is that the case? Because the Belgians shouldn't be making money from the frozen Russian assets. That profit should be, I mean, it's underwriting at the moment. I guess probably Euroclear makes the money just by being the entity that holds it. But I don't know. But the profits from these frozen Russian assets are being used presently to underwrite loans to Ukraine that then get repaid not by Ukraine, but by the profits from the frozen Russian assets. So there's kind of, I presume, like the European Central Bank or whatever gives $10 billion worth of loans to Ukraine, and then next year when you got to pay $1 billion of that back, we're actually going to take it from the frozen Russian assets profits, but not from the assets themselves. And what's going to change with giving all of the assets is they won't actually give the assets, as far as I understand it, but they'll give the value of the assets, and they won't underwrite it with the profits, but they'll underwrite the loans or whatever they're giving to Ukraine with the assets themselves. So that's the kind of collateral. The income of Euroclear depository, here you go, from reinvestment of Russian assets is already transferred to the European Commission to support Ukraine. That's interesting. However, the frozen assets also replenish the Belgian budget since tax is paid on the profit from them. Thus Belgium plans to use these revenues to finance military spending of 1.2 billion euros each year. So that's, so Belgium might be a little, they're being a little cute here in what they're doing. That seems a bit controversial to me. Ukraine is urging European countries not to limit its use of the proposed $163 billion. So the frozen assets that we're talking about, based on the frozen Russian assets, state assets, arguing that it needs to be able to buy non-European arms, repair war damage from Russian attacks, and compensate victims, according to Reuters. Now, this would be, I guess, the understanding that if the EU is going to give frozen Russian assets under their jurisdiction to Ukraine, then they might say to Ukraine, you have to spend this money on European weapons. You can't spend this money. And Ukraine are going to say, hang on, we really desperately need Patriot systems, and we're never going to afford to buy 25 Patriot systems without dipping into this money. And also, are you okay with us using it to compensate victims and rebuilding Russian war damage, etc., etc.? With EU leaders to discuss the reparations loan to Kyiv on Thursday to talks attended by Ukraine's president, some states suggest that funds be spent mainly on European-made weapons to boost their defense industries as threats from Russia grow. And I would understand that, though. It's in. You've got to be as clever with this money as possible, and Europe really. I can understand them wanting Ukraine to spend this money in a way that benefits Europe. We're sorting this all out for you. We are working really hard to get these frozen Russian assets, and the risk is all on us. So here's 163 billion euros or dollars, sorry. And then if Ukraine was going to say, thank you very much, EU, right, we're going to spend $160 billion on Lockheed Martin in the US and Raytheon, then the EU is going to be like, seriously, dude? Like, seriously? Really? So I do understand the desire from the EU to have that spent inside the EU for sure. If I was the British and giving I'm sure that's what we've done. But like, if we're going to give you this, we're working hard to give you this money that we've taken, and the risk is ours. Please spend it in the UK. Zelensky says Ukraine wants to use frozen Russian assets to mass produce long-range weapons with 150 kilometers to 3,000 kilometer ranges. Yes, 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 yes. Ukraine already has the capabilities, including the 3,000-kilometer Flamingo missile, but needs funding for production scale. So this, right, you've heard me say this a gazillion times. I'm going to say it again. You know, like I said earlier, scale, scale, scale. That's your game changer. This, I can imagine how desperate Ukraine is for that full amount of money from Euroclear. Because imagine you suddenly get $163 billion and you're like, right, okay, you know those flamingos we're building, and you know we're doing it a little bit with Denmark and maybe this country and that country, and you know we're getting, like, at the moment it's 1, maybe 2 a day, and we're trying to get to 7 a day. Well, 50 a day, please. Thank you very much. I mean, we've got the money now. We've literally got all the money that we could possibly want to do this. We're going to build 50 of these a day, 100 of these a day, 100 flamingos a day. Do it. You build 100 flamingos a day, and every day you are absolutely obliterating every single day a Russian airfield and all of its planes. Russian airfield, Russian airfield, Russian airfield, ammunition depot, military factory, military factory. Imagine what you could do in 30 days. 100 flamingos a day, plus all the usual kind of drones you've got. Like, imagine 30 days, you would just, honestly, you would obliterate. Like, that's the importance of scale. That's the importance of that amount of money and just building that. And I know it's quite simplistic, you know, oh, just big bunch of money, make 100 of those a day. Right? Things aren't as easy as that. But just, you know, that's what I want to see. Just massive destruction of the Russian military infrastructure, starting with bloody air bases and Yellow-Buga. Yellow-Buga drone production facility, gone. Strategic bomber airfields, gone. Strategic bombers, gone. Kinzhal missile factory, gone. Anyway, I'm getting excited because that's clearly not going to happen, but especially since they punted that decision until December. Okay. I mean, yeah. Okay, let's face it, 150 a day. Yeah, you're right. 200, 300, a million. Right. Maths doesn't make sense here. So Zelensky says he wants to ramp up the production of that kind of kit, and I completely agree. Right. Under a deal worth $2.13 billion, Britain agreed to supply more than 5,000 lightweight missiles. These are the LMM missiles. I've talked about these before, to defend Ukraine from Russian attacks, according to the New York Times. Production has ramped up faster than expected, putting it in a position to deliver an additional 140 missiles in time for Ukraine to use during winter. These are there's a really good video by Wes O'Donnell, actually, where he looks at these. So the lightweight multi-role missile, let's have a look at this. This is from Tars. If we go to share this tab instead. So LMM, lightweight multi-role missile, is an advanced solution for air defense, delivering precision, versatility, and effectiveness against diverse threats in challenging environments. Operational range 6 kilometers, so not huge range. Super lightweight and can go at Mach 1.5, so 1.5 times the speed of sound. Is that's right, isn't it? LMM benefits from a precision laser beam riding guidance system, allowing low collateral damage, and is thus optimized for operations in air, land, and naval environments. Equipped with a triple effect warhead and proximity fuse, LMM provides a response to various threats, including light armored, wheeled and tracked vehicles, or aerial platforms. So it's really multi-role. It really is pretty useful. The LMM missile excels in versatility, being deployable from various platforms, including standalone, portable, and integrated systems like the Rapid Ranger. Naval domain, land domain, so on and so forth. So they are getting 140 of these to Ukraine in by winter, like imminently, which is exactly what they need for this point in the war, where they're getting their energy infrastructure absolutely shellacked. So the Martlet is the LMM. and the Martlet's oh no, it's a Starstreak. I'm thinking it's really, really good. So the Martlet is one that's been used in man pads, that the British man portable air defense systems you put on your shoulder. You can fire them, but you can also kind of load these on with multiple tubes on various vehicles, or you can operate them from helicopters, right? And in fact, the Russians at the moment are using Igla man pads from their helicopters to shoot down Ukrainian drones. So these are super useful to use from the air or from the ground. Yes. Anyway, there you go. It is. I don't know if there's anything else that we can learn from this. Well, there's lots from this page, I'm sure, but for the purpose of what we're doing now, no, we'll move on anyway. So the point is that the UK are providing a good 140 of these up front, and that's absolutely brilliant. Of course, though, if the Russians are sending in 500 drones on a nightly basis, then and cruise missiles and whatnot, then you can easily chew through 140 of those missiles. But super useful for Ukraine. That's exactly what they need. And I keep being a bit pro-British at the moment, but I do think that you saw Zelensky in my video this morning. I showed you at the end Starmer with Zelensky, and the kind of love shown outside 10 Downing Street for Zelensky with the people there. Like, I think Starmer and our government, and our previous government did as well, are doing, I think, an awful lot for Ukraine. I've said many times before, there's an awful lot also happening in Ukraine that the British are doing that other nations aren't doing. And I think after this war, there'll be some realization of how much has been happening. There was a lot happening before the war started in its 2022 iteration. The British Special Forces have been out there prior to that. They're out there now doing an awful lot. They're heavily involved in mission preparation and organization and planning. And we are doing things that, listen to Woody Wiss on, I want to interview him when he was speaking, and I met him in Kiev. He was interviewed is a British guy involved in security by Jonathan Fink recently, and he was talking about exactly this. The British are doing loads. I know this. I'm out here. They're doing blah, 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 blah. Anyway, point is, good stuff here. Like, it's so rare to get things early, like especially in our MOD procurement is crap in the UK, famously so. Overruns and over budget, but to get stuff there ahead of schedule is cool. Now, more good news here. So Zelensky was meeting with Starmer yesterday in the White House, and they brought along this drone. So they had a meeting with the PM Starmer and presented the Ukrainian interceptor drone Octopus to Starmer. So the UK will produce this drone for further testing in Ukraine. The agreement provides for the production of the first batch, the president said. Thank you, UK. I don't want to have the sound there, but yeah, this is I don't know if it's a Wild Hornet. Drone manufacturers from Ukraine started off with this particular design of drones, but you see this an awful lot with interceptor drones now. I don't know what the advantage is of having that kind of four-winged, very unique looking drone configuration, but it seems like international manufacturers are also picking up on this, and a load of the interceptor drones that are being made now are the same. So the Octopus interceptor drone, which will be co-produced in Britain in its first stages, it is expected that about 2,000 drones will be produced per month, which will be transferred to the armed forces of Ukraine. Again, super bloody useful at this time in the war when Russia are hammering the crap out of Ukraine every single night and day. Then we heard that there are negotiations with Trump on the transfer of Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine, and they are currently underway. That's what Keir Starmer said the other day. He hinted at that. This is not just about Ukraine's freedom and sovereignty. It's a fight for Ukraine, for Europe, and for the UK. We are working with Ukraine for the benefit of the rest of us. Now, Starmer's office needs more gold. Yeah. Very good. Okay, so sorry, things keep flying away, so I can't click on them correctly. I'm not particularly hopeful that the US is going to give or allow any Tomahawks to get to Ukraine. They would be super useful, particularly, as I've mentioned before, for Yellow Booger. I'd love to see Tomahawks get there, but if they do come from Europe and not from the United States, right? So if they came from the US, then they were more likely to get the launchers, the ground-based launchers that are relatively new or thin on the ground. If they come from abroad, they're invariably going to be submarine launched Tomahawks. And I don't know if Ukraine, I mean, Ukraine's pretty innovative as a country, but I don't know how easy it would be to get a bunch of Tomahawks and then rejig them to be able to be fired from something that they don't have. So the question would be, okay, well done, you've got 100 Tomahawks from around Europe, but then, you know, how the hell are you going to fire them? You ain't got no submarines. But you know, where there's a will, there's a way. And yeah, I mean, the whole issue is the ITAR situation. The US would absolutely need to give their permission for those to go, and for each missile to be used. I would imagine they'd probably have some kind of oversight into the targets that were being struck, or aimed at. So Spain has agreed to participate in the purchase of American weapons for Ukraine, says El País. This is the Pearl Initiative, PURL, which gets expedited equipment from the US to Ukraine. And so then Trump can stand up and say, hey, we're helping Ukraine, except they're not giving military aid. Yeah, we're giving military aid to Ukraine. No, you're not. You're selling it to other people who are giving the military aid to Ukraine. But anyway, there you go. So the country will participate in the US arms supply program, but the exact amount that Madrid is ready to spend has not yet been determined. They are a country that is not really spending enough on their own defense as a percentage of their GDP to qualify for NATO. So, yeah, there is that as well. Now, Trump and Rutte, Mark Rutte, the Secretary General for NATO, are pressuring Giorgia Meloni, the Italian PM, to join Italy's Pearl arms procurement program for Ukraine, according to La Stampa. Rome initially refused, citing economic difficulties and public skepticism. Pressure on Meloni is intensifying, with Zelensky joining calls. She fears resistance from her coalition parties. The problem is for Giorgia Meloni is that she is quite strong rhetorically for supporting Ukraine. However, most of the kit initially came from the previous government. She's gone into government with a right-wing coalition where the two coalition party partners, other than she runs a Brothers of Italy party, and at least I don't know about the rest of the party, but I assume that they are similar to her. She's very pro-Ukraine, and it's actually become slightly more pro-Europe as well, pro-EU. The two coalition parties, Forza Italia, which was Berlusconi's previous, he's died now, but that was his party. He went into coalition with Brothers of Italy, and so did Matteo Salvini's La Liga. Now, these are right-wing populist parties. I mean, Berlusconi, if you read the book, I've just finished a book by Ruth Ben-Ghiat called Strongmen. It's an exceptional book about strongmen, leaders, dictators who were initially voted in democratically and then become these strongmen leaders, become these dictators over time. Viktor Orban's a good example, or he's on the way to becoming an autocratic leader. Same with Erdogan in Turkey, Hitler, Mussolini, Putin, and Berlusconi was one as well. So the things that Berlusconi did in Italy, it paved the way for the right-wing populist governments there now. But he was very much an autocratic leader in many ways. So anyway, Giorgia Meloni, if she wants to help out Ukraine, has to overcome the two coalition parties that she's in government with. And Matteo Salvini, as a deputy prime minister, is hugely anti-Ukraine. It's a right nightmare. However, that said, Italy have just got a whole bunch of other kits, older Centauro B1 infantry fighting vehicle type things, or like light tanks or whatever you want to call them, and then a whole bunch of other tracked and armored kits that's going to Ukraine. So they are starting to pick up a head of steam again, but she's certainly got a challenge ahead for her. Okay, so Tomahawks are tube launched. So if you're talking about Tomahawks, this is Clydesito here. They do have a couple of they've basically taken shipping containers and turned them into these launchers for Tomahawks, and the idea is that you can put those shipping containers on the back of a lorry, or you can put them on a ship, right? And so you can turn a ship into a Tomahawk launcher just by fastening these launchers. They also have the Typhon system, which has actually been around for a bit of time. They've got Typhon systems that I think have been taken now out to the Philippines to fire the Tomahawks. So there are options for ground launching these, but essentially, they are usually in Europe, off from submarines and whatnot. Okay, so moving on. Well, actually staying on Italy. Italy is readying a 12th military aid package for Ukraine, focusing on munitions for the SAMP-T, missiles for air defense systems. According to Bloomberg, Italy has agreed with NATO allies to raise its defense budget to an overall 5% of gross domestic product by 2035. That's important as well, because Italy is another country that doesn't really spend enough money on defense. They've got a pretty active defense military industrial complex, and actually their army, it's a sizable entity. I can't remember. In fact, there's a really interesting. I'm going to get this for you. You're going to love this. Where are you guys? Ukraine convoy conversation. This is where we're at, and this is going to be a. There was a piece in the Financial Times. Here it is. So there we go. I'm going to get the Reddit links for this because it's behind a paywall and I don't want to have to mess around with that at the moment. But these are, share this tab instead. Where are they? Am I going to have to find? No, it's not on there. So I need to find there are some images. Here's a Financial Times article. Sorry, I'm doing something that is a little bit dodgy, but don't look at what I'm doing because it's naughty. Okay, I need to archive that. Right. I'm going to come back to that in a second. We'll see if I can archive that page. And then I want to show you some really fascinating stuff on, there we go. I think it's already been archived. Yes. So here we go. Okay. So this is Who Pays for NATO. It's a Financial Times article from, I don't know when it was. That time is not relevant. And it's got some hopefully really interesting. Please be in here. Oh, you haven't got it. Oh, damn it. Okay, I'm going to find you the infographics that I know what I mean here, and I'm gonna get these to you imminently. And you are going to thank me for it because this is super interesting. But bear with me because I'm going to have to find where these are. I'm saving them here. Okay, and then we're going to bring them up into Ukraine. Here we go. Right, there you go. Share that. Right, you can all have a look at that for a second while I get the others up here. And here's the third one. Right. So you've heard me talk about these subject matters quite a lot. So we have the first one is here. Right, so the US dominates total NATO spending. NATO spending per country in 2025 in billions. So 980 billion. They just absolutely spend a ton of money on their own defense. So NATO spending, that's actually their own defense spending So remember that there are loads of caveats here because the US includes in their defense expenditure things like healthcare for all of their armed forces personnel and families, etc., etc. And we in the UK, for example, wouldn't do that because mainly our armed forces personnel use our central healthcare system, which is just universal healthcare, and we don't therefore see that as military spending, and you can't kind of, it's impossible really to take that out. Like, we don't know what military members and their families are spending in the UK healthcare system. It's just like, you have your healthcare, you just go to your local hospital if you're in the army or not, right? Now, there are some places, like I lived in Gibraltar for 3 years, and there was the Royal Naval Hospital out there, and I don't know if that's funded through the NHS or through the armed forces, but generally speaking, and obviously you're going to have in theatre military hospitals and whatnot, you know, in say Afghanistan, but generally speaking, like, there are complications to a simplistic view of how much money is spent by each nation. So it looks like the US spends, I would say the US is spending more, obviously a lot more than other countries, but A, they're bigger, B, they have a much bigger GDP and ability to do this, and C, they've spent 70 years making their entire economy and country run around actually a military of that size, and then that allows them to project internationally and blah blah blah. So they get an awful lot of return on investment from doing this. Anyway, you know, what I'm trying to say is that this is a very complex subject where it's very easy to just look at an infographic like that and say, well, these guys aren't paying enough. Well, actually, they're smaller countries and blah 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 blah. Okay. But then when you start looking at that number in a different way, then, oh my goodness, the size of that red circle goes down. So on a per capita basis, so, you know, you've got 350 million people, well, you're going to be spending $980 billion. Well, what if you've actually scaled that down to the size of Greece, or the size, it turns out that the US now per capita isn't actually the biggest in all of those NATO countries. On a per capita basis, the US is less of an outlier, with Norway actually leading the pack there. So Norway spends more per capita on its defense than the US. Now, the US is still per capita spending one of the most in NATO. That's yeah, still the case. But then again, you have all those caveats mentioned before about spending money on healthcare, where all these other countries probably wouldn't be including their healthcare expenditure in that number. So, you know, all those caveats. And then as a share of GDP, so the US becomes even less remarkable, because the US is such a massive economy, is able to spend more on defense, much more able than, say, I don't know, take Albania, right? So, you know, can you expect Albania to be spending proportionally as much on defense as the US, given that Albania won't have the defense military industrial complex that gets you that return on investment? So the US is spending that much on defense, but a lot of that money goes into building, you know, producing munitions and vehicles and all sorts, that then goes into this kind of big economic machine, and then you get that return on investment. So that $980 billion is kind of investing in its own economy. Well, Albania doesn't have the military industrial complex, and North Macedonia doesn't have that military industrial complex to do that. And so, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, as a share of GDP, the US becomes even less remarkable, and it sits kind of in the middle of the pack now, in terms of expenditure on defense as a percentage of GDP. So when you get, you know, Trump going nuts about the amount of money that the US spends on its defense, you know, there needs to be some careful deliberation here. And he is right to have said that. And actually, there has been a massive ramping up, but I don't think that ramping up has come because he said that, although many Republicans will claim that. It's the massive expenditure on defense from European NATO allies has come as a result of Russia invading Ukraine, and everyone realizing we've got to spend that money. Now, if Trump wants to take the plaudits for that, fine, as long as he goes and helps out Ukraine. He can have as many bloody Nobel Peace Prizes as he wants if he starts helping Ukraine in properly substantial ways. But anyway, there you go. So that's a bit of a sidebar, but I just remembered that. And thanks for, I think, Daniel Smith. I don't know if you are in the live chat, because you were the one that sent me those images, or put those images on a chat we're having. Right. Spain and Finland have joined NATO's Pearl initiative to fund US weapons for Ukraine. So Finland has pledged $100 million, euros, sorry. Spain has confirmed the move, as we've heard already, after talks with Zelensky. So that's good news. And indeed, sticking on Finland, they will provide 100 million euros in aid to Ukraine by purchasing US weapons through the Pearl mechanism, joining the Baltic and Nordic partners. PM Petteri Orpi said the support will be funded through new borrowing. Quote, the situation in Ukraine is critical. We cannot stay on the sidelines. So excellent stuff from the Nordic nations, who are routinely the best around for helping out Ukraine. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Some info coming from Mozzybugger about Albania. They took over the Adriatic Coast Guard from the Italian Navy, so the Italian Navy could focus on patrolling the Med. Synergy. Yeah, this is it. So this is how, and this is the benefit of NATO. This is the benefit of alliances. Actually, I'm going to keep that up there. Just have it. Sorry, I keep having these sidebars. If you are a transactional thinker, you think in zero-sum game terms. So this is, like I've said to you a gazillion times before, Donald Trump is a transactional thinker, and he thinks that he doesn't understand positive sum game thinking, which is if we both work together and spend money on doing X, then both of us will get a positive return on that investment, right? And we can work together to make ourselves both better. He doesn't understand that, because he's like, well, I don't believe in alliances. I think, like a real estate mogul, that there's no way in New York that I'm going to be succeeding in building stuff and another real estate mogul is going to be doing that as well. That if they're doing well, that's stopping me from doing what I could be the one building those skyscrapers, and actually he's building them over there. So screw you, mate. So it's the idea that if someone else does well, it takes away from you. And that's, sorry to explain again, but that's literally what zero sum. So if you add the plus from them to the minus from me, it comes to zero. So all transactions in the world have a zero sum. It means that every time you do well, I necessarily do badly. And every time I do well, you necessarily do badly. And you zero sum it. So that is how Trump understands all relationships in the world: political, military, economic, whatever. So he literally doesn't kind of understand alliances. But the NATO alliance is like, it's a positive sum game. We all work together and we all benefit. And what Ozzy Bugger is saying is a great example of this, which is, well, you can take care of this lot, and then that means it frees us up to go and do this thing over here. And if we start specializing, so the idea of NATO is that all, I don't know, is it 31 now? All 31 nations don't need to have the same capabilities as each other. There's no point all of you having amazing armies, amazing navies, and amazing air forces. Like, some of you are landlocked, so we're not going to be relying on your navies. So the UK is an island nation. We're going to do more naval stuff in NATO than we are land-based stuff. But now let's look at some of these land-based, landlocked nations in NATO. You can take more onus. There's more onus on you to do land force stuff, okay? And we specialize. And it could be that the Nordic nations, now they're getting together to work on, joint air forces and whatnot, Finland, Norway, and Sweden. You guys take more of a role inside NATO doing air defense. And it could be that Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, they take on electronic warfare. Like, now we don't all have to work crazy amount and put loads of money into electronic warfare research, because we're all working this together and we're an alliance, and it's a positive sum game. So if the Baltic nations become really good at electronic warfare, that doesn't take away from us not doing it, because we're an alliance. So we all benefit from that. So the idea is that NATO is just a massive benefit for everyone involved. And if Ukraine come into NATO, they bring their experience of modern warfare, their experience of drone warfare, and everyone in NATO benefits, because we all benefit from learning from them and from having their technological expertise. But if you don't understand positive sum game relationships, and if you think in terms solely of transactional zero sum game relationships, then NATO looks like a waste of money, and the EU looks like you want to break it up, because there's no way the EU can do well and the US can do well. And Madeleine Albright wrote a chapter on this in her book Fascism, talking about Donald Trump's transactional nature from her own experience with Donald Trump. And fascinating, because that's exactly how, and I know a lot of this is really, really obvious, but yeah, synergy is cheap. Sorry, people keep making comments. Synergy is the cheapest and probably the best way to go. Yeah, you need to be working together for your own communal benefit. But of course, that looks a bit like collectivism, doesn't it? And collectivism. So, along with transactionalism, or maybe underwriting transactionalism, is individualism. So when you look at generally how conservatives against liberals understand the world, conservatism tends towards individualism in many ways, and this then goes to libertarianism, but then there is a kind of sometimes a horseshoe or whatever, but generally you're going to get people on the right much more finding Ayn Rand and objectivism and individualism and libertarianism much more attractive. So Paul Ryan, when he was in the Republican Party, stood up when he was speaker, wasn't he, for the Senate speaker? He stood up with Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged and said, "This is my Bible," type thing, which is, this Bible written towards individualism. Collectivism is the other side, and then you get communism as the extreme version of that. But actually working together with other people for your own, that is, social democratic socialism, I would say, is this. We're not going to go to the extremes of communism, but we also don't like the idea of individualism. And if we work together and we pay, we might have a slightly higher tax burden, but that's a positive sum game, and we can all gain from having a higher tax burden. That means that, it's an insurance policy. If any of us fall, if we get ill, and I can't go to work, I'm not going to lose my house. But by the grace of God, I don't believe in God, there goes all of us could be, we're one car crash away from losing our house. Is it, or from being unable to put food on your table. And so, we have this insurance policy of working together, and that's a decent welfare state, and so on and so forth. So it depends where you sit on that spectrum. But some people are like pure libertarians, are like, no, I don't believe in paying into the government for anything. It's all us out. We're out for ourselves, and privatization and blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, but when your house starts burning down, mate, who are you going to call? Because now you're not paying taxes, you don't have a fire service, and when you get beaten up and mugged in the streets, who are you going to call? Because now, okay, so how does libertarianism work with state-funded services like the police, like the fire, blah, 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 blah? So where do you sit on that spectrum? And I would sit somewhere more over here, but certainly not over there, but somewhere nicely in the middle of a mixed economy where, we're all putting in and we're getting out and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, understanding NATO as part of this, and if you are an individualist, right, and if you are a transactionalist and zero-sum game thinker, then NATO just doesn't make an awful lot of sense to you. And especially if you're also really powerful. So where NATO is really important is if you're a smaller nation, like Lithuania aren't thinking, right, well, we can take on anyone in the world. Yeah, we're going to take you on. Lithuania, we're going to crush you bastards. They're like, we're tiny, we're buggered, but we're strong if we're together. And if we get together with like-minded people, then, we attack on one of us is an attack on all of us. Article 5, and it keeps everyone safe, no matter how big you are. But the US, because they're already massive and they spend $980 billion on defense, then they don't feel they need NATO as much. So Donald Trump, for example, might be looking at this and saying, well, we don't need to be a part of this. These guys don't pay enough. Screw them, blah, blah, blah. But then he probably doesn't realize how advantageous NATO is for the US, and probably just looks at it as a drain on his own resources, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, I think it's interesting to think of these more abstract ideas as we understand things like NATO. Okay, I probably lost half of you there in my random tangent, so sorry about that. Okay, where are we? We are in Patriot land. So new Patriots can be delivered faster. Zelensky has urged Europe to give up its turn. In other words, if you're waiting for Patriots, so this has already happened with Switzerland, if I remember correctly, they have allowed Ukraine to get some Patriots built and delivered to themselves before the ones that they've been waiting for, which had already been delayed, I think. So anyway, new Patriots can be delivered faster if you give up your turn. We propose to change the order. If we receive the systems now, we are ready to return them or replace them when our turn comes. So I ask you to be flexible regarding our air defense needs, which sounds, pretty fine to me, since they are protecting Europe, I think, themselves. So now onto France. As part of the 2026 spending bill, France intends to order additional Aster surface-to-air missiles and Scalp EG cruise missiles. So they evidently are still building Scalp EGs. That's good news. It's worth noting that France, Italy, and the United Kingdom have already placed a substantial order for 1,118 Aster missiles. So these are the ones used in the Santi air defense system that can, it's thought, shoot down ballistic missiles. It's kind of analogous to the Patriot system. I don't know which one is better. I presume the Patriot is better. Patriot Pack 3 is better at shooting down ballistic missiles. But then we've got the Santi NG coming out soon. It should be out, I think, this year, I was thinking. But anyway, I don't understand why the EU hasn't ordered a whole bunch of Santi systems for Ukraine. They have 2 systems that have been given by France, Italy. But anyway, the French order includes Aster 30 missiles intended for Ukraine. So that's good news there. We have more from France. The president of France, Emmanuel Macron, announced that in the coming days, Ukraine will be supplied with a batch of Mirage 2005F fighter jets, as well as new air-to-air missiles for the Santi air defense systems, presumably referring to the Aster 15 missiles and possibly Aster 30 missiles for intercepting ballistic missiles. According to him, a new training program is planned to be launched for retraining Ukrainian military pilots, which involves shortening the duration and increasing the efficiency of the training. So trying to get pilots through more quicker through the system. But it seems that there is an imminent announcement, or there will be an imminent delivery of Mirage fighter jets to Ukraine. So that is brilliant. I'd love to know how many there are. The understanding is they had 5 delivered initially to Ukraine. 1 was lost in a non-combat situation. It went out. Was it its landing gear or something? No, it wasn't its landing gear, but it came down in some, I think, some marshes or something in the west of Ukraine. President Macron said, we will deliver additional Aster missiles, new training programs, and new Mirage aircraft in the coming days. Good. So Mirages will be supplied. The next stage of testing of an innovative solution for intercepting cards, so these are guided glide bombs, was conducted at a training ground in France. This is a comprehensive solution: radar, software using artificial intelligence, and interceptor drones. Excellent. The development has already gone from concept to prototypes of various levels of technological implementation. 2 French and 1 German companies are involved in the project. This is super important, and I can't wait to see actually what this looks like. Really, the way that they're going to take down these card bonds, because it's got to be really bloody difficult to do that. Okay, Ukraine hopes to soon have a new NATO defense against aerial bombs. A new interceptor prototype has already undergone successful trials and training at a training ground in France. It combines radar, AI software, and an interceptor drone. 2 French and 1 German company. Yeah, so that's saying exactly the same thing. I thought there was a different bit of information there. Oops, I've now got rid of the entire lot. Let's go back to share that. Okay, so France also, sticking on France, is ready to deploy troops in Ukraine in 2026 if necessary, according to the Chief of Staff of the French Land Forces. We will be ready to deploy forces within a framework of security guarantees if this is necessary for Ukraine, he said. I think for a long time the French have been actually doing more for Ukraine. The problem the French have is the political system at the moment is quite not broken there, but it's just a third. And so they can't seem to make a government without 2/3 of the country going nuts, or 2/3 of the parliament, the assembly, going nuts. And so they keep having to reconfigure the government. This is Emmanuel Macron, and you've got the rise of the far right there with the Rassemblement National. And it's quite challenging, and also they're quite debt-ridden, France, and they can't agree on a budget at the moment, and that's really the big issue underwriting it. And so, when France is in a position to be able to help Ukraine an awful lot with kind of funding and weaponry and whatnot, they're also in going to find those very decisions very difficult to come by and for everyone to agree on. So. But I think Macron himself really does understand. I think Macron, Starmer, and Merz, and all the Nordics and Baltics, they really and even Giorgia Meloni, I think everyone really understands in Europe. Hungary, Slovakia, a bit different. Other nations, like Spain, not so interested. Like Portugal, probably not so interested because they feel a bit further away. But I think there is this understanding with the leadership that Russia really are who we say they are, right? And that Russia do provide an existential threat. And the juggling that every national leader is doing is that the domestic electorate don't necessarily understand that, or if they do understand that, then they still want the government to be spending lots of money and lots of time and effort on sorting out domestic issues. So Starmer keeps getting hammered for going abroad and doing stuff. I mean, my partner's father, when I see him 3 times a week, he's like, "Oh, Starmer's never here, Keir, or whatever." And you're like, "Yeah, I know this is what the right-wing media are saying, but at the end of the day, there is so much going on around the world at the moment that's so massively, massively important that I want to see the British leader do that. But then the domestic electorate are going to resent the time and effort spent abroad trying to sort foreign things out. And that's I think the same for all European leaders is that you always have to have your eyes on what's going on domestically, because if you don't, they will not vote you back in and you will lose power. And that's the tension that exists. Anyway, Germany is strengthening the resilience of the critical infrastructure in Ukraine by contributing 60 million euros to the Ukraine Energy Support Fund to help deliver generators, power equipment, and mobile thermal power plants more quickly. Yeah, just having a look, see if you guys have added anything to the conversation. Yeah, France might soon have a 6th republic. Yeah, they are struggling to keep it together there. Okay, now moving on to Japan. They are ready to provide Ukraine with all types of support except for the supply of lethal weapons, Deputy Head of the Presidential Office, Ihor Zhovka, has said. Now, Japan have just had a new kind of Iron Lady, a Thatcherite right-wing leader, female prime minister. And I don't know her position. If anyone knows her position on Ukraine, whether she's going to be strong on Ukraine, I mean, this sounds strong for Ukraine, and I presume this is coming from her leadership. So that sounds good. I don't know what her position on foreign diplomacy and geopolitics is. On October the 14th, Japan transferred to Ukraine over 100 units of special equipment for soil research after demining. So there you go. Right, now I'm going to play you a little bit from Wes O'Donnell. Damn it, it's taken the place.
Hey, check this out. Australia's Apollo laser.
Oh, stop it. Right, so we're going to go to, here we are. We're going to go to Wes O'Donnell. He's going to talk about an Australian system called Apollo, which is, I think, going to be pretty useful for Ukraine. So check out this.
Well, I mean, obviously. Cost about $1 a shot and never run out of ammo, assuming you've got power. And that's where Apollo comes in. Apollo is a 100 kilowatt class high energy laser weapon, scalable up to 150 kilowatts. For reference, that's roughly the power output of 150 microwave ovens focused into one invisible, incredibly angry beam. It's designed to take down what NATO calls Group 1 to 3 drones. That's everything from hobby-sized quadcopters to tactical UAVs the size of a small car. And it does it with style. Apollo fits neatly into a standard 20-foot shipping container. 2 laser emitters stick out of the roof like the world's angriest periscopes, ready to track and burn incoming targets up to 3 kilometers away. That's about carry the 1.86 miles for my fellow Americans. But here's where it gets wild. It can also blind drones' optical sensors from 15 kilometers away. In other words, even if you can't burn it, you can make it effectively useless, like taking the eyes out of a swarm. So let's talk speed. Apollo can rotate 60 degrees in just 700 milliseconds, less time than it takes to blink. It can engage 20 small drones per minute, and unlike kinetic systems, it doesn't need to reload. If connected to an external power grid, it can fire indefinitely. But if it's cut off, say deployed in the middle of nowhere, it has enough internal power to take out 200 drones before it needs to recharge. That's right, 200 confirmed kills while running on battery. Somewhere a Russian logistics officer just said, "Oh my stars," and fainted. Now, the mobility factor is another big win. Apollo can be mounted on a truck, integrated into a base defense system, or parked on a hill in a shipping container ready to ruin someone's day. It provides full 360-degree coverage and can engage vertically, meaning it can hit targets from above, which is important if you don't want drones dropping grenades on your roof. It can also plug into NATO's existing command and control networks, like Link 16, making it a perfect addition to layered air defense systems alongside missiles, autocannons, and Gepards. In short, it plays nice with others, a rarity in the defense world. Electro-optical systems isn't new to this game. I've talked about them before on this channel. The company's been working on laser and optical tech for decades. Their heritage includes remote weapon systems like the Slinger and high-precision space tracking systems. Apollo is the culmination of all that optical engineering experience, weaponized into a counter-drone system that works in real-world conditions. And that's the hard part. It's easy to build a laser that can burn a hole through steel in a lab. It's a lot harder when that lab is 115 degrees in the desert. Dust is blowing through every vent, and your target is a drone the size of a pizza box moving at 90 miles per hour. Now, Apollo is built to survive that chaos. And here's where it gets strategically interesting. Apollo has already been exported to a European NATO country. EOS won't say which one, but let's just say that if you're bordering Russia and you like kangaroos, congratulations. That sale marks the first time a 100 kilowatt class laser has been exported anywhere. One of the smartest things EOS did was make Apollo ITAR free. That means it's not subject to US export restrictions. Any country can buy it, integrate it, and even localize production without having to beg Washington for permission. For allies tired of navigating the bureaucracy.
So I think this is looking very, very positive, and I'm sure Russia is going to be desperate in trying to, well, all countries around the world are going to see something like this as a future for drone defense, being able to take down, and there are other options around. So the Americans have this new microwave, so rather than concentrating to shoot down a single drone, they're using microwaves to just take out drones and drop them out of the sky. So they had that recent example of where I can't remember the numbers, but something like 60 drones flying in the sky, and they took out 40 of the drones, and they will just drop to the floor because they just pulsed them with these microwaves. So all of these kinds of tech are going to be so many. There's going to be so much demand, given that everyone is looking at the war in Ukraine and seeing that drones, it's all about drones and counter-drone development. So, yeah, it's no surprise that we're starting to see a load of cool weapons come to the fore after sort of 3 years of looking at these drones do their thing. And if the Ukrainians can get their hands on some of these bits of kit at scale, that would be fantastic, wouldn't it? Because they're not expensive to run. Obviously, the R&D is the expensive part here, but like the Dragonfire laser that the British have supposedly developed, that I've not heard from recently, but that's supposed to be like what, 10p to fire that in terms of the expense of firing the laser, 10p a shot. That's cheap as chips. Like, wow, 10p to fire one of those bad boys. Whereas you look at like the cost of an LMM, the Martlet missiles we were talking about earlier, or any kind of weapon like that, Stinger, it's not comparable. But I don't know what the R&D costs would have been. Now, I reported to you the other day that some Czechs have got together and are fundraising for a Flamingo. They were trying to get together 500,000 euros. They collected it in less than a day. That's absolutely staggering. I did say something the other day that I was like, well, if I was involved in this, I wouldn't be fundraising for a missile like this. I would be fundraising for something like a helicopter. And some people misinterpreted me a little bit. I think actually Paul yourself who's in the live chat. What I was trying to say is, just from the psychology of fundraising, I would be wanting to fundraise something you could repeatedly see and you could feel good about fundraising for that. And I think that fundraising, assuming that you could get a secondhand helicopter for the same kind of price, if you can, because that you fire it and then it's gone and that's it, and it's like, oh, that's $500,000 we just fundraised for, and it might have got shot down by electronic warfare, and you're like, oh, really? Was it worth it? Now, it's not. So, given that there's finite amount of money to spend on everything, it's like, well, if we as fundraisers fundraise for a helicopter, like, I don't know, some kind of Mi-8 helicopter or something that we can pick up off the secondhand market, then, and that gets used to shoot down over a whole year period, it doesn't get blown up, that helicopter. It's used behind lines and it's shooting down Shahed drones, and we're seeing it. Like, we keep getting reports on this from the unit that we fundraised this helicopter for, and they've shot down like 70 Shahed drones using this helicopter. Then that, I think, is cooler for fundraisers, because you can continually feel good about having fundraised for that. Do you see what I'm saying? So I wasn't saying that it's a bad thing to fundraise for Flamingo. Go for it. I mean, but I would say, look, if you're going to fundraise for something, fundraise a helicopter, and then they don't have to raise money for a helicopter, and they can spend that on the Flamingo. I'm just talking about the psychology of fundraising there. That was all I was saying. But there you go. Okay. Are we going to come on to the cost of missiles in a wee while? Vigo says, for comparison, both the Tomahawk and the JASSM extended range cost $2.5 million each. The Barracuda 500 range 1,000 kilometer only costs 200,000 each, but the warhead is too small. It's 45 kilograms. So the Barracuda is a cool little. Oh, what's the name of the company that makes it? Not Alterion. There's an American company, begins with A. That makes a Barracuda. It's like a is it sort of a drone cruise missile or cheap cruise missile? That's the sort of thing you want to get to Ukraine. You can't take out. I know, Paul, you can't take out Yellow Booger with a chopper, but that's irrelevant for fundraising. I'm thinking about, just feeling good about that, seeing the results of what you've done. Imagine fundraising 500k for a Flamingo and it gets taken out by air defense. First time it's that one missile, it gets shot and then taken out. You're like, well, we just fundraised 500,000 for that. So I just think it's more of a risk, and I think it's just for feedback from your fundraising, I think like a helicopter that's shooting down Shaheds time and time again, night after night, I think it's probably just a better choice, but it's just my personal opinion. Right, General Sirski has said he's discussed aid packages with the NATO chief in Europe, General Alexis Grinkovich, who reportedly is responsible for allowing long-range strikes into Russia. Yes, I've talked a load about this. Their conversation focuses on new aid packages amid Russia's relentless attacks on civilian infrastructure. I am hopeful. Anduril, that's it, bloody Anduril. Is it not? Please say it's not Peter Thiel. Oh, please tell me that's not Peter Thiel. So Alexis Grinkovich I'm really hopeful that they've got someone decent, which they had anyway. Cavalli was decent when he was in charge of NATO in Europe. They've luckily replaced Cavalli with another like sensible military leader, not someone who's just some kind of MAGA loyalist, because I doubt you've got too many MAGA loyalists with that kind of high up and having that kind of handle on the American military. So I think it would be quite hard to come by someone like that you could put in charge of NATO. So luckily, that Grinkovich looks to be the right guy for the job there, and I'm hopeful that they have devolved decision making to the NATO leader in Europe rather than Hegseth and Trump, and so we can have serious assistance for Ukraine coming from the American military. Right, okay, on to the last section now, and we're going to start with. So I keep checking out the live chat because you're having a right old good old chat there. Chris Wiki thread here. Russia is said to be lagging far behind Ukraine in drone production, with dozens of Ukrainian drones for every Russian one. An angry commentary from a Russian war blogger complains of the ongoing failure by Russia to produce enough drones for the front. Now, I'm not going to read through this. I read through this the other day in a hits and losses video, but it is a really interesting thread about how in fact, I think it's this thread where I'm sure one of the guys said that they are using 40 drones for one person, wherever this person was. I'm like, if that is true, and I don't, yeah, here it is. For example, in the Zaporizhia sector, per one of our soldiers, Russian soldiers, identified by the enemy, there are 40 to 100 drones per one. Even if we take the lower limit of 40 drones, does that seem low? What are the chances of a stormtrooper or even a motorized infantryman surviving under these conditions? How long can a soldier survive on a battlefield? You can calculate it minutes within the margin of statistical error. We are lagging behind in drone production, blah, blah, blah. Now, I have been thinking about this topic. I've been reporting on this topic throughout the war because I think it's super important. Ukraine has to get the advantage wherever they can. And if they get an advantage, they need to maintain that advantage. Production of drones, quality piloting of drones, the tech of the drones, the Ukrainians need that advantage and they need to keep that. And it's really good if this is true, and if it is reflective of the whole front line, that's a whole other question, then that is excellent news. Now, I can't for a minute believe there would be 40 drones per single Russian troop, but that, if that's true, absolutely incredible. But anyway, yeah, there you go. So if that is true, then that's really good news for Ukraine, and they need to keep that. The Russians have their advantages, or did have the advantage in fiber optic drone production and capability. I think they were extending the range. I don't know if that's still the case. I know that there was talk that Ukraine had got fiber optics up to 60 kilometers, and I know you got the right person in charge of the Ukrainian unmanned systems forces, and Robert Brovdy, so he will recognize the challenges and what Ukraine need to do to wrest back advantage in any given domain. So that's cool. Okay, so right, we're moving on. Fabian Hoffman, who's a missile expert. So Russia is paying around $2.4 million per 9M723 short-range ballistic missile and KH-101 land attack cruise missiles. In PPP adjusted terms, it's around $0.8 million. So when you understand that, you know, everything's cheaper in Russia and that money can buy more stuff, you adjust how much a missile costs, and actually it's a lot less. So that's a good deal. So Russia's done a pretty good job at keeping the costs low. Okay, so although someone can test the PPP analysis, but anyway, we're going to look just very briefly at the cost of Russian missiles. This is a Militiani piece from Caliber to Kinzhal. How much do Russian missiles really cost? I'm not going to go into the deep details of this, but we're just going to look at different ones. So the Iskander K, which is their cruise missile Iskander version, that's $1.5 million a unit. You've got the modernized 9M729, which is this the Iskander M ballistic missile, which is $1.4 to $1.8 million. You've got the Caliber, which is $2 million per unit. You're not seeing so many of these used at the moment because they're primarily ship launched and they get shot down more easily than the other missiles, and they cost $2 million. So, you know, that's one of the more expensive ones we've seen so far. So you might as well ground launch your Iskander-K cruise missiles and probably have more of them because they're cheaper and more successful. Okay, nuclear warhead version 2 to 2.3 million. Not so interested in that. We have the KH-101 aircraft cruise missile. This one is exceeding 2,500 kilometer range. It's their longest range missile. That is 2 million per unit in 2024. Looks like in 2025 it might be 2 to 2.4 million. But anyway, yeah, so that's more expensive. Iskander here. Here's the Iskander M. So loads of different types of Iskander M. These are the ballistic missiles with cluster warhead, high explosive, etc., etc. So 3 million, 2.4 million dollars. So much more expensive than some of these other missiles, but these are ballistic missiles and much harder to shoot down. So is it worth buying 2 of these or one of the Iskander M? Well, I'd argue one of the Iskander M's. So what else do we have here? This is a Kinzhal. So this is their hypersonic missile. They're kind of indestructible, undefeatable, or whatever. I forget the word that Putin used before the war about how wonderful the Kinzhal is. 4.5 million. So it's much more expensive. But is it worth for a hypersonic missile? It's very difficult to shoot down. But again, you can get a couple of, maybe eke out a couple of Iskander M's for the cost of a Kinzhal. So go for one of them. And then finally the Zircon, which is a new missile that we've heard used 5.2 to 5.6 million it's estimated there. So do we have the KH-5969? These are the stealth missiles anywhere here. Let's do a Control F, KH-59. No, we don't. 69. No. So interesting, they're not mentioned. No. So okay, don't have that at all. Anyway, they're the relative prices of the Russian missile inventory for your information. Right, I talked about this morning, the hits and losses video. This is a good, cheap and effective way of taking out reconnaissance drones. The Russians have mastered the art, it seems, of using a small explosive charge on the end of a lance that they then ram into these drones, these reconnaissance drones. This has a number of advantages. One, it seems to be cheaper. You're using less explosives. 2, your drone is probably going to be more often than not reusable. So you can recover this drone, get it back and use it again. You're not destroying the whole drone by having the munition strapped to the underside and the whole thing exploding. You're just using a small explosive charge that then blasts at the wing and whatever, and it sends the drone spiraling down. But the other thing is it makes it lighter because there's not so much of explosives on board, which means that you can fly it for longer and fly it for at higher speeds, and that conveys an advantage for doing so. So that is pretty good for the Russians there, and the Ukrainians might need to look at that and adapt. Now, going back to, well, actually going to drones, not missiles, going to drones here. No, it's not drones, it's the guided glide bombs. Right, sorry, just remembering what this is about. Russia is fitting its UMP-B5R guided glide bombs with Chinese SW800 Pro wide turbojet engines. In other words, taking them really from being glide bombs to being almost cruise missiles, increasing their strike range to around 130 kilometers. Photos confirm the engine's use in recent attacks on Poltava and Lazova. The upgrade allows Russian aircraft to launch from beyond the reach of Ukrainian air defense, and that's what I was talking about earlier. This is China helping out Russia in a very obvious way, and they are using these to strike at the Ukrainians, these bombs with their extended reach. Something needs to be done about that, of course. And then finally, I'm sure you're all happy to know, because I've been going on for too long, mounting Ukrainian drone attacks in Russia are prompting Putin to tap a source of additional troops to try to protect vital infrastructure, according to Bloomberg. So a draft law will allow civilian reservists to be summoned to special call-ups and deployed to defend critically important sites. So you're going to see Russia, I think, desperately trying to drum up as many boots on the ground as possible, using all of the techniques they possibly can, without having to do a full national mobilization. Ukraine also desperately needing to get boots on the ground. If I was Ukraine, I'd be just going down a full-on mercenary route here. I'd be trying to get in people from abroad. I'd be trying to get in pilots as well, like trained up F-16. I would create a mercenary unit of pilots, and former Gripen pilots and former Mirage pilots. Get them in. We'll pay you. You can come and fly in a war, and bring it on. Help us out. And then you don't have to pay for their training. You don't have to wait for their training. And yeah, there you go. So that would be my position. But it turns out I don't actually make military decisions on behalf of the Ukrainians, or indeed anyone. But I am available to be a mercenary armchair general. So if you want to pay me to armchair general you, I'll happily do that. But if I make really stupid decisions, please don't. No, don't make me do that. I don't want to make decisions over the life and death of people. I'd much rather just ruminate from my room here. Thank you very much. So I'm retracting my offer to the international community to be a mercenary general. I've decided it's not for me. But I will criticize real generals from a position of rank amateur armchair generalship. Right. I don't know about this, Aussie. So I mentioned this morning in my hits and losses video that there is a claim that, there was an intercepted radio call of a Colombian fighting for the Russians. Now, we know that a lot of Colombians are fighting for the Ukrainians. But we also know now that they're fighting for the Russians. And the simple fact is these are mercenaries. And so I don't think they're necessarily ideologically aligned to either side. Whoever's going to pay your wages, and that's the threat with mercenaries, because they're not. That's a vulnerability of using mercenaries, because they're not. They don't feel they're fighting an existential fight here. They're fighting for money, so that they might not necessarily put their body on a line in a way that someone else would, and so on and so forth. Anyway, Colombians fighting for the Russians, and they were involved in a war crime, and the guy in Spanish ordered the troops to shoot civilians, women and children, right? And I don't know that you can make this claim. I just don't know enough about this. You mentioned Colombians fighting for Russia. I put money on them being FARC. So FARC are the left-wing guerrilla fighters in the jungles of Colombia that have been fighting for a long time. Yeah, I suppose they do have a long history, probably going back to communist days. Yeah, maybe. But I wonder. I don't know. I reckon you could probably build a case of them fighting for anyone there, but you might be right there, Aussie bugger. Anyway, I still think mercenaries are something that the Ukrainians really need to investigate using. Yeah, the flying, what was it? It wasn't flying tridents. Yeah, flying tigers. That was it. I'll call them flying tridents after the flying tigers of World War II. Yeah. And do you know what? I talked about the flying tigers. There's an article on them in the Kiev Post, I think it was, back like 2.5 years ago. And there was at that time when people were talking about F-16s, and there were people calling for a mercenary unit of pilots to be put together. Yeah, Cheryl, that's what happens when you hang out too much with Russia. You get bad habits. They're bad company. Look, thank you very much, everybody. I'm just going to go through a couple of super chats. Kevin Forst, total legend. And I really appreciate your support, matey, with your 5 ATP Geopolitics memberships. Thank you. We have the Pirate 6211. with some Norwegian love. Hit the subscribe button. Let's get JP to 100,000 subscribers. Please get my son Oscar one of those 100,000 subscriber plaques. Like, I want to put it up here, obviously, but it's really for Oscar. He's desperate for it. And I seem to be, I think YouTube hates me, or I just produce too much content and people can't handle it. Because I like crawl along with subscribers, and then other channels that are smaller than me just leapfrog me, and they're like that 3 times the size of me. And I'm like, man, I must suck. So I must suck. I know some of you obviously don't think I suck because you're still here, but I think in general, I think I must suck at what I do to some degree. Like, I think I just speak too long, I'm too in depth maybe, and I produce too much content, and it's not snappy enough. I need like 5-minute videos, and that's it. I sit for a 5-minute video, and it lasts an hour and 44 minutes. So there you go. Armchair General, I think Ukraine wants to win. Aussie Rob, I don't know what you're saying there. Are you saying like that my armchair generalness would not be good enough to allow Ukraine to win? I've made some pretty amazing armchair general decisions throughout this war. I think you're fine. Thanks, Aussie Rob. Thank you, Pirate. Thank you, Kevin Force. You are all legends in my eyes. I really appreciate it. People don't have very long attention spans. But yeah, there you go. Maybe that's it. I'll blame them, not me. Yeah, I'll blame them. Always, yeah, blame them. You don't make enough, JP. Oh, mate. Sometimes I struggle because I think I really need to be a 24-hour rolling news channel of just me talking to the world. Right, I'm going to talk you through this room for a second, and then I'm going to leave you, and you can get on with your Saturdays. Flag from James, who is now fighting, or he's a drone dude in, I can't tell you which unit he's in, but saw him in Kiev last time I went to Ukraine, and he gave me that flag from the 63rd Assault Brigade, and it's got some artwork of the unit and of drones, and it's absolutely wonderful. Just there is a military little military pack with medical stuff in, and here on the back of my chair is a jacket with patches on and stuff. That's a military jacket from Ukraine, and a military hat from Ukraine up there, bucket hat. I have that was Pete Fouché, who sadly died sometime back. Yeah, really sad. But I met him. He gave us that. That's a anti-grenade shell sort of thing, cartridge with his Project Constantine thing on the side. I drank from that to toast him at his funeral. Or not at it, on the same day. I've got a thank you to John P, who gave me that there, which is another cartridge which has wax in and a beautiful wick on top. So that's cool. This here, that's the postcard of the stamp of the Russian warship FU, which is on my Ukraine mug. That says, in like funky writing, apparently that says Russian warship FU. So I think that must say Russian warship at the top, and then that's FU in a way that looks like the tridents. So anyway, that's that postcard. That's a NAFO number plate, registration plate for one of the NAFO vehicles. That Pierre gave me that. I love it. You can only just see it, half see it. It's a lit up, so it works off the power and it lights up, and it's the train board of all the train destinations and times for all the trains that they kept going at the beginning of the war, or are they the ones that were stopped or whatever. It's absolutely, I really like that, but you can't see it very well. I've got the Vyshyvanka there that I should wear more. That's from Mark and Olena. And the female shawl scarf, I forget what it's called. That's a Vyshyvanka. All the patches, some from units that I've met and interacted with, other from just random units, and a patch thingy there, and another. That's a Car for Ukraine flag signed by Ivan and people from Car for Ukraine, whom I met in Lviv at the workshop there. And Ivan gave us all gave me a flag. And that's a knife from a guy who's called the blacksmith. That's his job outside of being in the army. I met him in Mykolaiv. He came back for 3 days off to get married to his missus, and he gave me that knife, and it was one of the most emotional moments of my life there. So that was that. I'm getting emotional now thinking about it. Vakula, which is the mythic sort of blacksmith, that's what his call sign was or is. That is a picture that has been created by a unit who were operating near sort of Krinky at the time, and I met them near the Dnipro River, and it's signed on the back, and that's all made with like crystals and stuff, and like it's really cool. I'd have to show you that close up to show you how absolutely cool that picture is. And that is pretty much that. I think there are other bits and pieces. I've got like Ukrainian bracelets and other trinkets and stuff up there. That book came from Olena's parents' house. It's a book on philosophy when she was at university in Kherson. I think that was one of her books, so it was really cool. And that's what's going on in the background there. So this is chaos, and it's not as cool and stylish as most people's like studios. This is just my old kind of office thing. It's damned messy out of camera view, but you know, that's what's going on in the back there. So I thought I'd just talk you through that. And that's why I don't get enough views, because I spend my time doing stuff like that. I need to be more clickbaity. Yeah, absolutely. Rants get more views, more rants, always more rants, more rants. Who is it that gave you his penknife? I have to talk you through that in more detail at some point and show you some of the videos in it. So what was absolutely beautiful, why it was so emotional, is we had borscht with him and his wife, or now wife. It's myself, Greg, Zhenya, and Pierre, and it was absolutely wonderful. And afterwards, I struggle. I can't bend over and put shoes on and stuff. I have to sit down and blah blah blah. Anyway, because my multiple sclerosis. And I was struggling, and he put my shoes on for me. And this soldier who had been fighting on the front lines, the day before or whatever, to get down on his, on his haunches and put my shoes on for me, it was incredible. So yeah, so that was that. So yeah, stories like that, they stick with you. Yes, it's a real Ukraine office, isn't it? That is true. And of course, the ATP sign, which was a Christmas, well remembered, King Raccoon. It was I should have mentioned that. So that's a Christmas present from a missus a couple of years ago, and I freaking love it. And you can change all the modes on it. Yeah, this is what true YouTubers do, right? They just have stuff like this. Anyway, there you go. So Betty Pie talking about, lots of variables, the algorithm, but the longer watch time has the biggest impact, gets more recommendations, which creates more viewers. Oh wow, I need to do 12-hour videos then. Right, okay. Thank you very, very much. This is right. You've been watching, Jake Bro did a video on this. This is something we are working on. I mean, I'm not driven to get a bigger channel or anything like that. I just want that plaque, really. That's the main thing, that just Oscar, it would make Oscar's life. But there you go. The mug, this mug I bought in a shop in Kiev, just the metro underneath where the Ukrainska hotel was, and it was just in there. I was like, what's that say on that? And she said, I think it says Russian warship, you. I was like, I'm getting that. I'm getting that. So yeah, I don't know what I might do. I'll tell you what, here's the thing, Benny, if you can design that, Benny, we'll sell that mug on the merch. So below there is a merch thing where you can buy like ATP Geopolitics t-shirts and stuff, and Ukraine stuff. We can surely design that. That's not copyrighted or anything. Let's make that mug. Let's do it, Benny. That's your job. I don't know, this month. Yeah, you can buy lots on eBay. Yeah. So yeah, I'm sure it'll be a lot cheaper on eBay though. Okay. Awesome sauce. Take care, everybody. I really appreciate you, and I love having you chatting. We were talking, right, actually, final kind of thing, because this is what Benny Pie is talking about. we're just talking about that. AIM is to post to all major networks to increase traffic. So this is the kind of Jake Bro approach to being everywhere all at once, right? I have an ATP and Philosopher Facebook page. We've got Discord, but actually we're going to make a separate ATP Geopolitics Facebook page. And obviously we've got the Discord, and then, you know, try and have places, because I love the chat that you guys have, the hanging out, the live streams are absolutely beautiful. But the more places you can hang out, the better, and just, you know, stick together and support Ukraine. Yeah, I don't know if it is intellectual property though. Like, it's not copyrighted. There's no copyright. It literally is bought from just this little shop. So yeah, it's not copyrighted. I think that is just a mug design. In the same way that there are loads of Trident stuff that you'll find on like Redbubble, and it's just taking, yeah. But I do understand. I do get that concern about someone's put the effort into that, and if we just copy it, but I don't think it's copyrighted either. So anyway, there's no evidence it's copyrighted. But that's a good point, Paul. It's definitely a good point. I don't like to do things that are bad for people. Okay. Take care, everybody. What is my accent? It took me quite a while to get used to it. It used to pass you by because it was hard to understand, but you grow on people, and the longer I watch, the easier it was to watch. I've got like a really neutral British accent. That's really odd that you'd say that. Interesting. You think I'm difficult to understand? There you go. It could be that I speak too quickly. That's more likely the case. Anyway, stop talking to me. I need to go and need to let you go. All the best, everybody. You are truly appreciated. Thanks to the mods who are awesome. Thanks to Grimsoft, the Discord channel. He doesn't get enough props for keeping that thing going. And thanks to all of you, Benny Pie, JR, everyone who's just awesome. Take care. Toodle pips.